Isn't it absolutely a disgrace that they have not requested him to come back? You know Trump can bring this person back, and he has not done so.
Well, I'm not going to condemn him for that. I can agree with you that this appears to be an error and maybe guy.
Descriptive. First of all, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. You know, I often am like annoying people on Twitter with my little lib takes, my lib lawyer takes, and it is nice every now and then to catch one, you know, hook, line, and sinker, and to get someone who's willing to engage, who perhaps thinks a little differently. So to catch people up, why don't you give yourself a little introduction, and then I can talk about why we're here.
I'm Ron Coleman. I'm sometimes called a Trump apologist, and I might even be guilty of that, especially because he's my client. So I get paid to apologize for him sometimes. But politically speaking, I am pro-Trump, warts and all. I do acknowledge the existence of warts. I'm a lawyer who has been involved in politics for his entire adult life. I was formerly partners with Harmeet Dillon. I'm not anymore, which gives me a great deal of freedom that I didn't have the previous 4 years or so. But when it comes to polemics on the internet, I pretty
This guy's a famous First Amendment lawyer. He's argued before the Supreme Court.
much recognize this as a
Okay.
some zero game. It's us and them. Intermediate positions are fine for dorm room discussions, but it's a two-party system. The other party hates us, will kill us, enslave us,
Jesus.
and here I am.
Thank you for that introduction. And can you describe the painting behind you? I'm really interested in it.
It is a World War I era pitch for supporting libraries. Public library books are free.
Interesting.
Knowledge wins. And it was published evidently by the American Library Association before it switched its main task to transing children in middle school.
I see.
Oh boy.
Appreciate that. I just wanted you
for you.
I just wanted you to explain the painting, Ron. Right? We didn't get a apology right away. No, I appreciate it. A little background on me. I'm a lawyer. I'm a just an internet lawyer guy who comments on things. I go by Pisco, so I'm not yet publicly doxing myself. And certainly I've been in the game as long as you have, Ron, right? But I do have sort of seen your appearances and had a lot of fun watching the Laid Back Law program every Friday, where you and some other lawyers appear. Yeah, and listen, we take some fun at your guys' expense every now and then. But I think, number one, thanks again for coming. And to give you some, the folks in the audience some background, I reached out in a reply to Ron on one of these cases, on basically the recent case, the Kilmar Garcia case, to see if Ron was willing to come on and have a chat about that case, perhaps some other cases, perhaps some Trump-related cases. And he was willing to do so.
And to be very clear, I'm not paying close attention to any of them. I just, that was a pure troll, because who was it that you called illiterate?
Will Chamberlain. Yeah, that guy's a hack.
Okay, well,
This guy's a First Amendment lawyer, did somebody say in chat? He's already opening with the unbeatable conservative strategy of, oh, I don't know anything about that. I don't even know. I have no clue. We're already, okay. Strong opening.
Maybe you're illiterate. but in the spirit of internet, internet mixing it up, here I am.
Listen, I don't take it personally, but thanks. No, I appreciate that, because as a fellow attorney, I really think that what you got here is untenable, counselor. I think that what Trump represents to the rule of law, and I think the Abrego Garcia case is a perfect example of it, is nothing short of the end of the republic and the institution of authoritarianism. And I don't know how anyone who respects the republic can stand up for the guy, given all of his malfeasance, all of his authoritarian ways, but really, as shown in the recent immigration practices in these cases, it's absolutely condemnable. It is deplorable. I can put in a bunch of adjectives there, but really, are you actually paying close attention to what's happening? Because it's insane, and it's corrupt, and it's authoritarian.
So you oppose the statute that gives him essentially plenary power.
Oh my God.
To do what he did, right?
Do I oppose the Alien Enemies Act, or do I oppose what statute are you referring to?
What statute do we understand him to be operating under?
He was not deported pursuant to any statute at all. This is Kilmar Garcia. If we're referencing that case, he was not deported pursuant to any law. It was a completely lawless deportation that's not premised either on the Alien Enemies Act or the Immigration Nationality Act. Completely lawless.
Well, hold on a second. This is the Garcia who already had a deportation order?
This is the...
That was stayed, though. He wasn't, right?
Garcia, who was granted withholding of removal.
Yes.
In 2019.
Right, but he was subject to a deportation order, right? Which he just disobeyed?
No, there was a granting of withholding of removal by the immigration judge in 2019. And obviously, once you grant a withholding of removal...
It's so crazy and funny to me how lawyers become laymen when it comes time to do political debate. Like, what happens there? It's so crazy to me that they'll be like, oh, well, wasn't that guy ordered for whatever? It's like, no. That he received a, I don't know the particular term is, but there was a stay on that. He didn't have to be deported. He was a withholding of the deportation or whatever. Like, whoa, I thought he got deported. Like, I don't understand what happens here where, it's so stupid.
Then there is no valid final order of removal which can be applied as to Kilmar Garcia. In the process of the litigation, they conceded removability in that he had no legal status, but obviously there are other methods by which you can defensively apply for relief, and he applied for withholding of removal and was granted it by the Trump administration IG.
True.
By the Trump administration IG?
Yep.
My understanding is that...
Wait, now look at what he's about to do here. Wait a second. Hold on. Your understanding? I thought you just said you haven't really been following this case. Now, if I'm being generous, which I shouldn't be generous because these guys don't deserve it, maybe he's followed it a little bit enough to have like kind of a super layman's understanding, I guess, of it. But like, it's interesting that you're going to give us an understanding of the case when you said you weren't following this at all. But okay, go ahead.
That he was, let's see here. Why was he deported? He was, right, designated MS-13, denied it.
Wait, you don't believe that,
Court
do you?
nonetheless concluded that he was. Chief Justice Roberts agreed Monday to pose a deadline for the right. So how did he come to the U.S.? He wasn't illegal. He had a work permit. I mean, it seems to me, look, I think that there is a problem with making a ruling, you know, with conducting a sort of sweep in this way. It does seem that I want to understand what you just said about the Trump IG. Who is the Trump IG?
It's this woman, Maria.
Inspector General, right?
No, so IJ, an immigration judge.
Immigration judge.
Yes. Her name is Coleman or something, Marie Coleman. Oh, sorry, no, that's not the IG. That's the one for the Mahmoud Khalil case. My bad. I actually don't know who the IJ was in that case, but the IGs work under the Department of Justice and the Executive Office for Immigration Review under the Attorney General, and so they're not Article 3 judges. And it was a Trump administration era granting of withholding of removal, and everyone, including the government and now the Supreme Court.
Previous administration, right?
Yes, version 1. Which is why, by the way, this whole business about MS-13 is absolute trash. And everyone who's repeating it, including the Attorney General of the United States, including the Vice President of the United States, including everyone in the administration, is a decrepit liar. I mean, we're talking about someone who, yes, I mean, there's absolutely no basis to assert that there's a reason to believe that this person is associated with MS-13. What they claim to, and what they cling to, is the pure hearsay statement of an individual who said that Abrego Garcia was part of the New York outfit of MS-13, even though he's never lived in New York, even though that admission or that hearsay statement was not credited by the police at the time, even though the person who recorded that statement is someone who has problems in terms of corruption himself. If you look it up, he was like paying a prostitute or something, basically, it's all garbage all the way down. Even the Fourth Circuit opinion that looked at the evidence says it's basically just that hearsay statement and the fact that he was wearing Chicago Bulls clothing that they determined that he was a member of MS-13, but it's complete garbage, and they have not tried to develop that at the district court level. And furthermore,
but they're not. Isn't the only occasion to develop that at the district court level at habeas proceeding?
No. In this, so they would have been well within their rights before the district court in this case to present facts before the record. In fact, the district court asked what facts.
But were they obligated to?
I don't know if they're obligated to show it. Whether he's a member of MS-13 or not, the deportation was illegal. It's kind of immaterial. It's just the optical point you mentioned MS-13. But the truth is, there's not a good basis to believe this guy's a member of MS-13. And if he was, right, the administration claims he's a prominent member of MS-13. What I'm meant to believe is that in 2019, the Trump administration just let out a prominent member of MS-13 in 2019. They let him get a work permit. They just let him into the country. Does that sound right to you? The Trump administration would let out an MS-13 member, didn't raise a stink about it then, didn't appeal his withholding claim. It's all bullshit, man.
The first Trump administration, I have no problem believing that at all. I mean,
really?
Trump never really obtained control over the government in any meaningful.
Oh boy, is he gonna say Trump never obtained control of the government in a way of saying that like Trump was incompetent, or are we going with like a deep state explainer here?
Way, so that doesn't really surprise me. But legally speaking, I mean, I have news. Can I throw something up? Because apparently there was just a ruling from Judge Sinis.
Yep.
And it goes something like this. Judge Sinis issues 2 orders in the El Salvadoran case. That's a constitutional law issue. And then court continues to assume Garcia is held in El Salvador. Oops. My hotel reservation instead. Take it off. Yeah.
Well,
anyway,
let's get the brass tacks. Yeah, so let's get the brass tacks here. I mean, everyone concedes that this deportation was illegal. The 9-0, one of the 9-0 decisions of the Supreme Court is that this is an illegal, lawless deportation. Lawless.
Where does it say that in the?
Go to
Show me that where it says that in the.
Okay, so this is the opinion of the court. It says on March 15th, the United States removed Kilmar Abrego Garcia from the United States to El Salvador. This is on the very first page. The quote: "The United States acknowledges that Abrego Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal." That is the unanimous court. Illegal.
Is that the same thing as lawless? Did they use the word lawless? Because that would be that's a very important. That's a very important polemical point.
I take lawless regardless of the polemical point.
They said that it was unlawful, right? They said it was
I take
unlawful,
I take lawless to be unlawful and to be illegal. I take them to be synonymous.
It's not the same thing.
You're gonna
Because
explain the difference.
lawless, well, they're two different words. Unlawful means in violation of the law. Lawless means unconstrained by any concept of legal process whatsoever.
Okay.
Basically,
to the extent that that distinction matters, to the extent that that distinction, you care about it. For me, it's a distinction in this context without much of a difference. But I'm happy to use your term and the court's term, illegal. It was an illegal deportation. It was unlawful.
So the system works. The Supreme Court says that.
Real quick, this idea of the system works is bullshit. And I hate that anybody ever tries to get away with this bullshit excuse for lawlessness. The idea that you can break the law and then have the court come out and correct you and go, oh, well, look, LOL, the system is working when you were intending to break the law. It doesn't work for a few reasons that I'm not even bother getting into, but the most important reason is because sometimes you could try to break the law in a way that the court can't help afterwards, which is where we're at right now. That's happening right now, where a law has been broken, and now the court's saying, hey, you got to bring this guy home, and the administration is going, oh, well, we can't do that, LOL. Now you're fucked, right? It's not okay to just intentionally break the law and go, oh, well, the system's working because the court said, oh, no, that was wrong. Here's a slap on the wrist.
That it was an unlawful act. Evidently, it was a screw up.
That's what they claim.
And as a general rule, well, I mean, until it's proved otherwise,
yep.
we'll go with that. I mean, it seems. Do you have any reason to believe that the Trump administration would choose to die on the hill of a guy who apparently?
Really? We're really going to do this argument? Do you really think the Trump admin would do something so crazy? Yes. Hello? What?
Should not have been removed. Like, what? There's so many people eligible for removal. Why would you go this way?
I think this administration is trying to see what it can get away with. So, for example, in the case of Mahmoud Khalil, they're trying to deport on the basis of the this provision of the INA that makes deportable people who the Secretary of State designates as a threat to the foreign policy of the United States. And in that case, it's like pure conclusory language in their two-page memo that Marco Rubio drafted up. And so they're really trying to stretch the limits of their authority here. And so yeah, I wouldn't put it past. I can't prove it as we sit here that they would set up a case that was as
but it's super
positive
believable
for the people who are against the Trump administration. But let me just finish what I'm saying. I can't prove that. All I know is that it was an illegal deportation. I think we can agree on that. Unlawful deportation.
Yeah, yes. So it was. So the Supreme Court said. So the question now is, what can the courts do? What can the court or the government do about it?
Well, that I think is a legal question. Good.
Well, it seems like it appears that the Supreme Court is hinting to Judge Sinis that she cannot order the Trump administration to do something with respect to a person who has been deported.
Unlawfully deported.
In the United States.
Yeah, so I want us to get to that because that's kind of one of the legal issues here, and people have made a muck, including Will Chamberlain, I think, have been dishonest about the what that ruling actually says. I think actually the way you put it is maybe I wouldn't totally agree with it, but certainly better than how Will Chamberlain put it. But this is the question I want to ask first, and like what I want us to run the ground on. Isn't it condemnable? Isn't it absolutely disgraceful that they acknowledge that this individual was subject to an illegal removal? He should not have been removed. It was against the law to remove him. That in fact he was granted withholding under the Trump administration for in fear for his life. They've sent him to an infamous detention center where these people barely get any time out of their cells at all. They have no access to no stimulus. Wide-scale reports of abuse. Isn't it absolutely a disgrace that they have not requested him to come back? Trump can bring this person back, and he has not done so. Isn't that a disgrace, sir?
Is it more of a disgrace than the other? I'm not gonna. You think I'm going to do a whataboutism? I'm not.
That is what you're doing.
Is it more of a disgrace than the other illegal immigrants who were sent there, but without the problem that you've described?
I would say it's more of a disgrace.
Because they've admitted fault here. They've admitted
in the case of the alleged alien enemies from Venezuela who were sent to El Salvador to rot away in the gulag. At least for those individuals, someone can make even a facial argument, we didn't know that we had to provide these people with basic due process. I mean, that is a ridiculous proposition. But even, I think bad faith attorneys even, I'm not saying that you're bad faith attorneys, but bad faith attorneys can say, oops, we didn't know that we had to give these people even an opportunity to file a habeas petition. In this case, there is no possible way for us to think that they thought that this was legal. They claim it was a mistake, fine. But in this case, right, it's illegal. You know that this person should not be there, should not be in secret. Right. Isn't it a disgrace?
So we can both agree. So we can both agree. I'm not in the disgrace business, but can we not both agree? But we do both agree that the right thing to do would be for the White House, the administration, to find a way to get this guy back.
Yes. I agree that we both agree on that, but to the extent that they haven't, right? So but I want to, because what I want us to focus in on first is that I do want to get to the law. But if it's the case, right, the Trump administration is disclaiming any responsibility here, just as a moral, ethical matter. Right? You agree, right? If Trump really wanted this guy back, he could get him back.
Yes.
Can we agree on that?
Yes. Come on.
I don't really know, but it seems to me really probable.
Okay,
I mean,
that's fair. That's
he's
fair.
the president of the United States. He has a good relationship
Yeah.
with this guy. They're buddies. He's contracting them. He's paying them money for it. If he really wanted them back, you think Trump?
Or it's just let's just say it's the United States of America and it's El Salvador. Like, we really don't even need to say more than that. We don't need to prove that he's buddy. I mean, you can go the extra mile, whatever. Like, obviously, if the U.S. wanted this person back, it would happen. You snap your fingers and do it.
bring him back? He could bring him back.
I would just spitballing with you. I'd be really surprised if he couldn't.
So the fact that he has not exercised whatever power he has
is a
to bring him
deliberate
back,
choice.
that is disgraceful. And whether or not you want to call it disgraceful or not, you should condemn him for that.
It's
Well, I'm not going to
condemnable.
condemn him for that because just as, I mean, again, remember what I said to you in the beginning. It's ridiculous to expect someone to condemn the politician of the party that he's a member of when the alternative is people who have much more inhuman policies and much more disgraceful policies. So
Listen to what this guy's saying. I'm not going to condemn Trump for him doing stuff that you might not like, because the other side's even worse. This is a cult mentality, right? Not even willing to say that your side might have engaged in a big bad, or your side, not even willing to admit that because you think the other side is worse. That's on its face. That's like disgraceful. It's morally disgraceful.
I can agree with you that this appears to be an error and maybe even be
Also, by the way, in a more succinct way, or actually, no, he just came out and said it. But I would argue in a fairly succinct way, I feel like I proved this in my Piers debate over the firefighter guy, where Piers was like, don't you think you should say no to this? Or don't you think that you should condemn this type of behavior? It's like, hold on. What is Dave Rubin going to say about January 6th? Dave was like, well, that's a totally different. Like, this is exactly what they do. This is what I accuse them of doing. It is what they do, right? They have zero moral standards for their side. They have no moral standards for their side. And it's unbelievable.
and much more disgraceful policies. So I can agree with you that this appears to be an error and maybe even be morally questionable, but I'm not obligated to condemn my guy, just as I don't expect Rachel Maddow to condemn, Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. I don't
You really think so?
I mean, first of all,
He
I condemned
doesn't
him
expect
more.
them?
I condemned Joe
I
Biden's
bet he
corrupt
does
pardons
expect
of his own
them, too.
family. I said that it was impeachable, and I condemned him for it. I said, Joe Biden, that was an abuse of power, and your preemptive pardons of your own family were impeachable. I said that because actually I do expect people who stand on principle to call out their own side. I think that's no more, no less than we can do. I think not doing that makes someone
But the election was over by then. The election was over by then, right?
Whether it was or wasn't, what difference does that make? The election is over now. Trump,
Because your condemnation was of no, he wasn't running for anything. So now you're just a free agent making moral judgments, which we're all entitled to do.
But there's no election now. But there's no election now.
Oh, there's the election. Well, Donald Trump is not running for re-election, but
There's
there's a
always the
political
election.
battle going on.
Oh my God.
So
So he can never morally call
So
it
there's
his
a political
side
battle
ever.
going on, and so the question,
Ever.
I think, a fair question for you at this juncture is, what is the remotely moral argument to defend Trump not doing what it appears that reasonable men would say he ought to do?
Oh my God.
What possible
He
rationale
ought
can there be
to
for that?
have
And
no
it
rule
may
of
go
law.
to what you said,
He
which is
ought
that
to break.
Donald Trump wants to push things as far as he possibly can get away with them. But I can back it off just a couple of clicks from there and suggest that what he may want to do is reassert that the principle that courts cannot tell the executive what to do beyond certain limits, and that limit has been crossed here. And whether or not he reaches that point, and I think he's got the Supreme Court this close to doing that for him, with the back and forth that's gone on over the last couple of days between the district court and the Supreme Court and the Fourth Circuit basically waving at the whole thing and not being particularly effectual in either respect. But I think President Trump, and this is entirely me winging it because I have no inside contact,
Yes, you're not speaking. You're speaking as an observer.
But my take on this is that what he's probably doing is he wants the Supreme Court to agree with him that he doesn't have to do it, and that if he does it, he'll be a gentleman. And if he doesn't do it, now there is also another argument. If he doesn't do it, even if he gets that and he doesn't do it, then I would have a hard time understanding that.
Well,
I'd have a hard time understanding that.
I'm happy to move on to the law and to talk about our opinions on what's going on in these cases and to actually talk about the separation of powers issues, because it sounds like you have interesting things to say about it. So I won't linger too much on this condemning point, this moral point, but I just want to really push, though, to make sure what it would take for you to condemn him. So, for example, if it turns out that Kilmar Garcia is dead, buried on the orders of Bukele, would you condemn him for that?
Only if I had reason to believe that Donald Trump was responsible for it.
So if you found out that there was an understanding, that's what it would take. It would certainly take Trump to knowingly kill an individual.
That would be lawless. That would be lawless, and I would condemn that. Absolutely, yes.
So wait, so he condemns it? Look at what he just did there, right? So you do condemn lawlessness, but before you said you wouldn't condemn it because that's a moral question. Like what are we doing here? Why did we just adopt that standard? So then if the Supreme Court says that this is lawless, or if the Trump administration is engaged in lawlessness, then you backpedal on what you just said and you would actually condemn it? Like,
but when we reach a level of arbitrary and illegal deportations, and that doesn't cross your threshold, you can't say, for example, you could say something to the effect of,
I support. Arbitrary. It's not arbitrary. They clearly, someone blew it. And they may have blown it on purpose or they have blown it by accident. But this was a person who had a deportation order.
Oh my God, back to the dumb arguments.
Like, what stops you from saying, I support Trump's agenda, I support Trump's policies, but this action is wrong and Trump should be getting him back effectively. Why can't you, with,
Oh, nothing. I say it right now.
Okay, all right. Okay, listen.
It was wrong. It was wrong, and intention doesn't really matter that much. It's an interesting question, and it might matter if in theory he had a Section 1983 claim, or if there were some legal recourse, intention might matter. But for purposes of what should be done, doesn't really matter. Supreme Court agrees, and everyone familiar with the facts seems to agree. It shouldn't have happened.
Would you tweet at him saying,
and when it should,
what?
Everyone familiar with the facts seems to agree. It shouldn't happen.
Everyone familiar with the facts.
Would you tweet at him saying,
when it
Mr. Trump,
happen,
I'm a big supporter. Bring him back, sir. Sir, could you bring him back? Would you tweet out? I'm not saying that you should do it right now, but like, is that something you'd be like willing to do? Like, for example, I tweeted out at Joe Biden when there are things that I disagree with Joe Biden on. Would you be willing to say something like, if you were to have a conversation with him, or if you were to speak publicly on the matter, would you say, Mr. Trump, I agree with you in your policy. This is wrong, and I think that you shouldn't do it, and I think you should bring it back. You wouldn't be willing to do that.
No, I wouldn't. No.
This is a cult. He's describing a cult. Understand what this guy's saying, right? No, I would never criticize. No, I would never criticize Trump publicly. No, I would never say that. Ever. No, ever. Never, ever, ever. Right? But look at how much hand-wringing they do on the Democrat side. I can't believe the Democrats won't say this or won't call out the... Think about... It's so funny, right? What is the largest, most unifying criticism that the Republicans have made towards the Democrats? That all of you guys came together to hide the mental deficiencies of Joe Biden. All of you came together to do it. And here he is outwardly saying, I would do the exact fucking same thing. And it also, by the way, it proves my point when I said before, Biden stepping down showed that Democrats are willing to criticize their own and are willing to unify even against their own president in a way that Republicans never would. And I think I'm right on that. And I think that conversations like this, I think, vindicate that point. He wouldn't. He would never, ever, ever publicly call for Trump to step down or publicly call for Trump to even reverse course on an action, let alone step down.
Policy, this is wrong. And I think that you shouldn't do it. And I think you should bring it back. You wouldn't be willing to do that.
No, I wouldn't. No.
Because it would jeopardize politically your side. Is that fair?
It would jeopardize my side. Okay. That's right. It's a war, and I'm on the side of the war.
Okay. All right. Let's move on.
It's a war. It's a war. We're in war right now. That's how they treat it. It's warfare between which political side is elected to office, right? And again, also, I love that he illustrates this. I love that he's saying all this. It's so true, right? Remember the differences that I said before between the left influencers and the right influencers? What do people on the Republican side say? I don't give a fuck what Trump does. I'm always supporting him. We're at war with the Democrats. What do the leftists online, your Hassan Pikers, say? I'm not going to choose the lesser of two evils. I'm not going to make a choice between those two. I'm just not going to vote at all, right? And on the right, I don't give a fuck what Trump does. What would I do if Trump raped my mom? I'd beg him to only do it once, and then I'd still vote for him. That's what I would do, because I sure as hell am not going to let DEI happen. It's like, Jesus, bro.
It's a war, and I'm on the side of the war.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. I'll let you speak. Sorry.
No, I actually don't think I had any particularly well lined up words to say.
Okay. I think it's a very interesting question because I understand where the administration lies in terms of there must be some things that are beyond the power of the district courts and about the federal courts. I think that what we have to find out is where are those limits and what exactly are they? Where are they and what are they? So, for example, I think it would be absurd to suggest that the district court could order the president to do a SEAL Team 6 raid to bring Mr. Garcia back. And if you were to take, for example, effectuate to its logical, most absurd, like the greatest meaning, right? The most inclusive meaning of effectuate.
Make it so.
Yeah, right. You would have to, I suppose, invade El Salvador in order to get Mr. Garcia back. It can't be the case that the district court is empowered with the power to do that. And I think, but that said, right? So I understand these fears. And another example I can bring up is imagine that the United States was somehow responsible to have illegally placed someone in Gaza at the time that they were kidnapped or something by Hamas. I think it would also likely, be absurd to think that a district judge could order the United States to engage in negotiations with Hamas under those conditions, one way or the other, right? Hamas is a foreign, there's no effective control there. You're undermining it sucks. They did something illegal. Same thing with the Russian Federation. Imagine there's a court order from a district judge saying you have to get Brittany Griner back, and Putin's going to know about this injunction or this order, and I can see how it could very quickly get out of hand. And so I take it seriously. I take the separation of powers and the Constitution seriously. I just think it's very different from this case. This case, it appears to be a completely contractual relationship. You said right at the start of this that you acknowledge that Trump actually almost certainly has the power if he wanted to bring him home. It's not like the Brittany Griner situation. It's not like the situation where you're undermining the negotiations with Hamas. And it can't be the case that the president can just contract away the constitutions and let's say, put a U.S. citizen in El Salvador and keep paying him to do that and have that be, you can't touch it?
That's right. Reductio ad absurdum. If there are a number of propositions that we will not accept.
Yeah.
One of them is you can't pick someone up off the street, put them into the custody of the United States military.
Yep.
And now it's foreign policy.
Yeah.
That's asinine. That's asinine.
On that we can agree. Okay. Because otherwise they could pick up this judge, throw her to El Salvador, and then no one can do anything about it. That seems absurd. Yeah.
Right. That's right. And I've actually not been particularly comfortable with that. So the case that came up with Judge Boasberg.
Right. The Alien Enemies Act case, for those of you who are following, he's referencing the case in which they deported 200 or so people who are alleged alien enemies, members of the alleged, I should say, who they shipped off to El Salvador, and Judge Boasberg had an oral order to turn the planes around, and they were saying that's not good law, they can't force them to do that.
Not necessarily turn the planes around. Also, it could have just been bring them back, to be clear, and that was specified in the order. But
yeah, that's what you're referencing. Sorry.
Yeah.
I've had that a little troubling as well. It can't. The problem is Judge Boasberg, who I have a case pending before, but I wouldn't say anything different.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's a civil copyright case, only tangentially involving January 6th.
Really? Wait, what copyright's at issue there? One of the reporters, maybe? Reporters?
No. So one of the lawyers, Dan Hull, one of the lawyers for the defendants, entered into an agreement with an expert on juror attitudes in support of a venue motion, which the motion was, of course, denied because.
Did they want to reuse the expert's report? Did they want to reuse that expert's report somewhere else?
No. The problem was that they couldn't pay for it. They thought they'd have the money for it, so they made an agreement to buy this report for $30,000, and they didn't come up with the money, and everyone was pointing fingers at the other co-defendants. So Hull ends up as the guy holding the bag, and the plaintiff, in order to add some leverage to the case, turned into a copyright infringement case. And really, Judge Boasberg could have and should have gotten rid of the copyright claim early on, but instead,
what's the theory of infringement?
That the report is an original work, and that the public listen to this, that the publication of the work was filing it in the United States.
Does that count as publication?
Well, I argued, although it didn't really ever get resolved on this issue, that would not be publication.
Yeah.
Jury agreed with me.
Yeah.
We took it to a jury. Jury agreed with me, but they came up with a damages number that was something larger than $30,000, which is not supportable by the evidence.
Right.
So we have a whole bunch of post-trial motions in front of him now, and he was a little. This is before he got busy with this case. Not particularly proactive as a judge. It was great fun though. In any event.
And you think he should be impeached and removed?
Could you please slow this down? 1.25. Here you go.
No, I'm against the whole impeachment approach.
I heard you guys arguing about the president unnominating judges and having taking away their salary.
If that was last Friday, I wasn't there.
Okay.
That was
the Friday before.
I do not believe that impeachment is appropriate for judges being bad judges. I think, frankly, if the Supreme Court would do its job and wake up a little bit earlier in the morning and maybe work over the summer like the rest of us, a lot of the judicial activism that conservatives complain about would have been addressed and even prevented by now. But the Supreme Court, for all the reasons that everybody ascribes to Roberts and his philosophy, is they have allowed the perfect to be the enemy of the good, such that innumerable circuit splits and bad decisions are left hanging out. The circuit courts really run this country now. In any event, no, he should not be. He should not be impeached. Although I wouldn't mind a close look at the manner in which he was assigned the case, because I will tell you from my own experience, the assignment of judges to cases is not random.
Boasberg said that it just came through the docket as ordinary. Now, I don't know if he's accusing that of getting assigned in a different way or whatever, but I think Boasberg said, no, this thing just came through ordinarily, through like a flow of cases, but okay.
Everyone who litigates in federal courts knows it's not random. Some judges get certain kinds of cases all the time. And that's a problem. The Judicial Conference needs to look at it. I don't really think Congress has any business looking at it.
Look at the conduct of the government here, Ron. I mean, he couldn't have known in advance that the government was going to be as sneaky and underhanded as they were during the course of this matter. So, for example,
that brings up the next important question, which is, can you do this? Let's say you have a valid, not the picking up somebody arbitrarily off the street, but you want to make a test case, or you want to conscientiously invoke the Alien Enemies Act against this gang.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's creative. I'm all for that.
It's stupid, Ron. It's not in keeping with the.
That's ridiculous that he would
hold
grant
that point.
that.
If
Or,
your
I'm glad you didn't
employment
grant that.
of that remedy is dependent on
Oh, he's talking about another case with the same judge. Well, he was talking about his case for a second. So maybe he was only talking about his case there. I guess maybe not.
your timing with respect to before the judge hears it, so that you can say, "Oh, they're out of it, they're out of our jurisdiction now." I've got a problem with that. In other words, it shouldn't matter. It is true that Boasberg didn't have jurisdiction over them once they got up on that plane, but that should not be the way you execute policy.
Well, I guess I have.
Let's do it before the judge.
Yeah, so I'm glad you say that. It's very obviously what they were doing was to try to escape judicial review in that context. They've done it in many other instances before.
So as a policy matter, Pisco, I don't see how that's a win. I think that's a loss. Whenever you do something that looks like you're hiding from the judge or evading a ruling, you're not winning. You're only making...
Not winning where? Because of the court of public opinion, all they've done is attack the judge. All they've said over and over again is, oh, well, this judge is actually evil. This judge is a piece of shit. This judge is a liberal that needs to be impeached. So, I mean, they're trying to win in the court of public opinion. Remember, the goal of a dictator here to subvert a democracy or a republic is to just have the support of the public. They're representing the will of the people, system and process be damned. That's the goal. That's the point.
The judiciary more suspicious of you. You're undermining your legitimacy, and you're not testing the legality of something that you do.
They don't care about the legality and the legitimacy. The courts have less legitimacy right now than the president. That's why they constantly appeal to the popular vote, you know?
Presumably.
Yeah, if you were
Under
good
color of
faith,
law.
if your side, I have to say, not everyone on your side, but most of the prominent, talking heads on your side were good faith,
Then
of course
that'd be
you'd be
true.
correct.
But they're
all
not.
talking about, Marshall has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Yep.
They're all following J.D. Vance's line, and
Trump tweeting out. And again, remember, when Biden said anything, or when Hillary said anything, we were mind reading. We were digging as deep into these quotes as we could to try to find some intent. When Donald Trump literally truths out, "He who saves his country violates no law," and it's like, well, what did he mean by that? Give me a fucking break.
the judiciary cannot act, and we don't need to listen to any judge. I mean, they're all saying this stuff because that's what they believe. They believe themselves to be above the law, or at least above judicial review.
They do.
And I can give you 2, 3, 4, 5 examples where the administration has done something specifically to evade judicial review. If you want, we can...
The administration literally filed an executive order saying we, the Department of Justice, has the final say on what the law is. That's not true. Hello?
Go through them. I think for me the most prominent
let's
example.
do that.
Yeah, for me one of the best examples is the spending freeze. Initially, there was a spending freeze from the Office of Management and Budget. The then acting head of the Office of Management and Budget, he issued a policy. It was like a 2-page memorandum that said all federal financial assistance must pause, must stop, must cease, must be frozen. And he defined it as to exclude Social Security, Medicare, but not Medicaid. And there was a TRO, because obviously Congress controls the purse strings, and if you want to do things according to you want to make temporary freezes, you have to follow the law. Congress has made remedies for these kinds of situations where the executive needs to temporarily halt the payments of stuff. And so that was the situation. There was a TRO. And so what does the Trump administration do? The Office of Management and Budget sends out an email that says, we are rescinding the memo. We're rescinding this previous memo of the federal financial spending freeze. And then what does this 27-year-old Carolyn Leavitt go out and say in response to questions? We've rescinded the memo, but we haven't rescinded the policy.
Yeah.
And they're in court arguing that, Judge, you can't review this spending freeze policy because the memo is not in force. The memo having been rescinded in our follow-up memo, there's nothing for you to review, Judge. So we've signaled, we've sent out the memo, then we've rescinded it, and now there's nothing for you to review, Judge. But we've said vocally, orally, that the policy has not changed at all. And the court, in maintaining the TRO on that spending freeze, said it was a clear and obvious attempt, and I can show you the opinion that says so, to escape judicial review in that context. It was so obvious. I mean, why would you do that? What explains you rescinding the memo but keeping the same exact policy other than trying to escape judicial review?
Well,
So the judges agreed that they would be irreparably harmed. That
are we just not
strikes
going
me
to engage with that?
as a tactic that failed, right? And so the judge left the TRO in place.
Yes, the judge left the TRO in place, and it was an attempt. It was an attempt to evade judicial review. What I'm telling you is, whole
But
point.
ultimately, they went back to court, right? And the court said that's not going to work.
Oh my God, dude. I'm almost positive you could be sanctioned for this as a lawyer. I don't know all the sanctioning rules or whatever, but like, you're not supposed to litigate in bad faith. You're not even supposed to be in front of the court as a litigant pro se or as an individual in bad faith. You're not supposed to lie to the court. It's not just to be like, oh, let's see what kind of cutesy shit we can get away with. Like, you're not supposed to do this and then just see what works and what doesn't work. If for no other reason, it's rude. You're wasting the court's time. The courts are busy. They have a huge docket. They've got tons of cases they've got to hear. The idea that you would come in front of a court with a knowingly facetious claim, like, it's absurd.
Yes, the court said that's not going to work. But what I'm trying to tell you is that's the
at that junction, they said, "F you, judge. We're doing what we want," or they listened to the judge.
Well, there's still that is unclear, and that's being developed. Just to be clear.
Okay,
but there's
so what you don't like is an aggressive and apparently not very well advised tactic.
Aggressive tactic.
Like,
I'm so curious what this guy, and I don't know his political opinions, okay? I am ascribing that he's a fucking maggot, okay? But he might not be, you know? Maybe he's got more reasonable opinions on this, and I'm not aware of it. But my question would be, I'm curious, like, did this guy make the same types of allowances when, for instance, Joe Biden tried to rescind all student loan debt, or when he was trying to cancel student loan debt? Did he say, well, you know, it's a legal thing that he's attempting, and we'll see how the courts respond, and as long as he follows the courts, it's okay. I'm not going to hold, you know, Joe Biden accountable for this. I'm not going to, you know, go freaking crazy over it, as long as, he's following what the court says ultimately. Do you think he had the same take? Or when they did try to do the OSHA vaccine mandates, he was like, well, you know, he's exercising his authority as president. We'll see what the courts say, you know? Like, I'm so curious what his public statements were on that. I know at the beginning he said he supported Trump, but I'm just saying I'm curious how unhinged his statements were on the other side here.
The judge didn't buy, and they ultimately listened to what the judge said.
No, because they keep trying to find ways around it.
I don't want to say that they ultimately listened to what the judge said. I don't want to make that representation, but I certainly am just pointing out that it is of accord with what they did in this case with respect to the Alien Enemies Act. Is they're trying to put people on planes, send them to El Salvador before there's a chance to vindicate any kind of case or the rights of these individuals, and before there's a chance for judicial review, to do it as fast and as quickly as possible. And that's just one example of their attempt to do so.
I will say this much: there is an unusual policy challenge that has been placed when you have a situation where the previous administration has lawlessly refused to enforce the law with respect to immigration.
Really? Oh, so we are going to say that the Biden administration acted lawlessly there? We are going to make that strong statement here they wouldn't make for the Trump admin. Okay, so he answers my question. Gotcha. Okay, so he has been unhinged. He would never grant this. He would never, ever, ever grant this on the other side.
Millions of illegals in. To say that we will now record each illegal that has been let in by virtue of the previous administration's refusal to enforce the law will now be entitled to a full Article 3 hearing presents a definite policy problem.
It's a policy problem. And should they follow the law? Should the government follow the law?
Yes, the previous government should follow the law, and this government should follow the law. And in fact, one of the things Pam Bondi impressed me with, one of the only time I ever worked with her.
Oh God.
Was when we were at the Philadelphia Convention Center in 2020, trying to observe the counting of mail ballots, which we had a court order allowing us to do, but the Philadelphia Elections Board refused to follow. Someone said, "Well, why don't we just rush the door? Why don't we?" You know, she said, "No, that's not what we're here for. We're not here to
such
demonstrate
integrity.
That we don't follow the law.
Good
We're here
her.
to follow the law."
Good for
Right.
Pam
So it
Bondi.
might be inconvenient, right? It might be inconvenient that you have to give. It might be inconvenient you have to give hearings to people, but that's the law. And if you don't like the law, if people don't like the law,
it may or may not. It may or may not be. It may or may not be.
Oh my! And now we just
under the Alien Enemies Act, they're not entitled to. Well, they might be entitled to.
They're entitled to an opportunity to file a habeas petition and to have it heard in a court.
You definitely, like I said, if your policy is dependent on sneaking out in the middle of the night,
which is what they did.
It's not.
Which is what they did. Pisco should get a full concession on that. They did sneak them out of the middle of the night. They signed the order, and then they acted on it before it was even made public. On a Friday night, they did do this exactly. They did exactly do this. Wow, pal, thanks for the 5 gifted YouTube memberships.
It's not legitimate.
They're doing, Ron.
That's what
they're doing. They're sending them over to the gulag.
So let me hear number two. But these, let me hear number two. So the spending freezes, or you want to say number three?
They did do
number
this.
Two is the MS-13
Just be careful.
I mean, you said you had like 5 of them.
Yeah, so that's Tren de Agua. So there's the Alien Enemies Act deportation. That's separate from the alleged MS-13. This is Kilmar Garcia. So that's 3. So right. So number 1, spending freeze. Number 2, Alien Enemies Act deportations under Tren de Agua. Number 3, Kilmar Garcia. I'm going up to my newsletter where I can find more for you. So with respect to the deletion of agencies, right? They promised, for example, to delete the Department of Education. That was a promise. They've stopped short of officially, or the CFPB is another example, right? The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They've stopped short of officially like decommissioning those agencies, but have effectively stripped them of all funding, of, fired all their employees, or at least a lot of their employees, shut down their offices. So that's another attempt, right, to try. Again, I have a list somewhere that it's not coming to mind, but it's just a consistent pattern of this. Yeah.
But evidently the president has the power to do that.
Oh,
you think the president has the power to
unilaterally shutter
the agencies that have been statutorily enacted by Congress?
If Congress...
So the answer is no. If you say if Congress, no.
Doesn't describe a specific...
They did for USAID. They did specifically describe it, but...
Which it can't, because it's an executive function. Congress
can't create a department that the president can't unilaterally shutter? Really?
A specific, which it can't, because it's an executive function. Congress says this is what the agency is going to be, and here's the money for it. It's simply not up to Congress to say here's how many employees it has to have.
Literally, Congress can literally delegate stuff like this, and the president is not allowed to do things like, for instance, like a reduction in force unilaterally, but like definitionally. So I don't know where he gets that unless I'm misunderstanding something there.
I mean, I don't think that's been overturned. I think, on the contrary, the courts have found that is not a lawless, but a lawful policy that you don't like.
I think it remains to be seen.
Congress probably has the power to do something about it.
What could they do, right? What could Congress do to insulate their agencies from a rogue president?
Let's be clear. Congress can't do anything these days. Congress is truly a useless organ.
Not relevant.
I mean, it is a real shame
Red herring.
that there is nothing that's considered to be sufficiently uncontroversial that the United States Congress can agree to do it, except on the most partisan lines.
So regardless of the practicalities here, formally, what could a Congress do to insulate their agencies from being stripped apart from a rogue president? And by the way, I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that this policy is lawful. There are some injunctions still in place right now protecting and preventing certain firing bonanzas, like in the CFPB. I think that there are some existing TROs and injunctions that are preventing that. So I don't take it for granted that this action is lawful to do. But what could Congress do if it wanted to protect its agencies from, or the country's agencies from a rogue president?
Probably constitutionally, you can't do anything.
Really?
But that doesn't make it unlawful. It means that you don't like how the Constitution works.
But definition, either I'm misunderstanding something or he has a novel understanding of Congress and how these things work. Because my understanding is Congress is allowed to dictate, Congress is given the exclusive authority to create a new office in the presidency. And then Congress is given the exclusive authority to dictate how those offices run. Insofar as they can clarify, like, your inferior officers and what the office does and appointing, a budget for it. But okay, I guess.
Which is that the president has the power to run the government.
The president has the power to run why would you invoke the Constitution and then just say a phrase that's not found anywhere in the Constitution? The president has the power to run the government? What the fuck does that mean?
It's your assumption that the executive branch means they can do anything they want with the executive agencies and the departments. I think that is
just not true.
That's my assumption. The Constitution's assumption.
No, it's
because
not.
You just said to me, what could Congress do? To which I respond, to which we both agree, apparently nothing.
Do they?
I don't agree with
it
that.
certainly
Thank
can't
you.
be that
Okay.
the
Don't agree with that.
judiciary,
Please
the
go.
least democratic branch, should be allowed to say, here's what we're going to do.
But when the judiciary does its obligations under Marbury versus Madison to say what the law is, and they read, for example, the enactment statutes of some of these agencies that say there shall be a Department of Education, and that department shall have this, and the third, and you have a president who is explicitly saying that we are going to get rid of this department, notwithstanding the fact that Congress has enacted it. What you're essentially saying is we're at the mercy. All we have to rely on is the good faith of an executive to do. To ensure that the law be faithfully executed. But you've even said right now, at a bare minimum, you should say that's the wrong way to do it, right? If Trump...
God, I know it's a whataboutism, but Pisco should ask. So then, were you okay when Biden wanted to forgive all student loan debt? There's 0% chance that this guy would be okay with that. Or were you okay when Biden said that he wanted to do OSHA mandates so that everybody was vaccinated? Because you're saying it's up to the president only, right? And it's his department, right? Would you be okay with that? There's no shot this guy would bite the bullet on that.
wants to get rid of the Department of Education, he's not taking care that the law be faithfully executed when he guts the Department of Education.
True.
You're saying that perhaps it's not a justiciable question.
Well, what you call gutting so you're saying instead of relying on the good faith of the person who was elected by the American people, we should rely on the good faith of a judge who was appointed.
But oh my God, we're really doing this
by the president, and who may have only lived in this country for 2 or 3 years.
Oh my God.
Or who may be a Mayflower descendant. That doesn't really make that much of a difference.
Pisco should just okay. So you don't like the law because your issue here. Where does it say a federal judge has to live here for a certain amount of time, or what does any of this have to do with anything? Judges are appointed; they're not elected. Yeah, you just don't like the law.
But who the people have never chosen. In other words, good faith. We're only just arguing over who should be the one to take care.
No, hang on a second. No, we have a law from Congress that the Congress is in charge to make the laws and make the agencies to make the departments to organize them. And there is that law, which should be respected. And we have a situation here where the president of the United States, you're right. So Congress made a Department of Education. The president is saying, I am trying to shut it down. And what you're suggesting is.
And the people who went ahead and elected him.
That doesn't matter. What does that have to do with anything? It doesn't matter if the people elected him. It's every layman's argument. I don't understand why this happens. Explain this to me. Why do lawyers turn into laymen when they're fucking dick-sucking Donald Trump?
Okay, if they elected him with the understanding that President Trump...
Yeah, thank you. If they elected him with the understanding that President Trump was going to murder all U.S. citizens, does that make it legal for the president to murder all U.S. citizens?
Would institute a monarchy. Do you think that he should be allowed to institute a monarchy?
No.
If the Constitution would permit it, yes.
Oh my God, that's not what he's asking. This is like the 75 IQ caveman question. Hey, did you know that I have a friend called Sarah no. It would be fuck, what's this is a 4chan thing, right? Like on average, women are shorter than men. And then some guy goes, really? Well, I know a woman who's taller than a man. And it's like, you're not rebutting what I'm saying. Are you fucking retarded? Why the fuck would you say that? On average, NBA players are taller than people in grade school. Oh, really? I heard about a grade schooler who is taller than the shortest NBA player. Why the fuck would you say that? Why is he saying, if the Constitution permits, so now the law does matter? Before you just said as if the president wants to do it, now it's...
Do you think that he should be allowed to institute a monarchy?
If the Constitution would permit it, yes.
Obviously, it doesn't.
But the Constitution does not permit.
Right. So
the Constitution doesn't permit.
So then the answer is no.
But the Constitution does permit.
The president,
or may very well permit.
May
because
very
there's no
well.
other way for the president to run things other than the manner in which he, as executive, executes the law.
So when can, in fact, when will you agree with a judicial ruling preventing the executive branch from doing something?
Never.
Actually,
that's a great question because apparently the president can run shit however the fuck he wants. So the judiciary should never have oversight over what the president, because we're always going to assume that he's executing the laws in full faith or whatever. So I guess there's no oversight ever. How could this guy ever answer this question besides saying I would never agree with the courts being able to oversee this?
When would that take shape?
It would have to be unconstitutional.
Okay, but
how do you even decide if it's unconstitutional? What do you mean? You have to be able to adjudicate an issue to figure out if it's even unconstitutional in the first place.
Why does some judge get to decide what the president's doing is unconstitutional?
Yeah.
Right? Why does some judge get to decide that Biden can't forgive all the student loans? Why does some judge get to decide, we voted for Biden, we elected him?
I'm so curious. Wait, hold on. I'm not going to listen to this whole thing, but...
Let's talk about credibility.
Let's talk about
Dr.
credibility.
Brett Osborne, a board-certified neurosurgeon with
Give me
over
some
20
goddamn
years of
ivermectin.
experience in medicine. This is real medicine led by a real doctor. Many so-called longevity clinics are run by... Let's talk about credibility.
Oh, I tried to skip it and they bring him back to me. Okay, fuck it, dude.
20 years of experience.
Yeah, what do you
in
got
medicine.
for me?
This is real medicine led by a...
That's a very...
Okay, so remember, this guy believes, all right? Now, this is a January 13th, 2022 video, okay? This guy believes that the president can do whatever the fuck he wants with executive offices. He can do whatever he wants because he's the president of the United States of America, and they're his offices to do with as he pleases. Okay, that's what this guy believes. All right. Now, this was just linked in chat, so maybe he is going to be consistent here, and if he is, good for him. But let's see what he says about Biden.
That weighs very heavily on the scale of public interest, because the court found, as it did, that there was a constitutional violation here. The Occupational Safety and Health Act did not authorize, which it plainly did not.
Oh, whoa, wait a second. Now the laws in Congress matter. The OSHA, wait, hold on. I thought they were federal offices that the president can do whatever he wants with. Now he's saying that you have to look at the law from Congress? Why would it matter what Congress authorized from OSHA? Like, the only thing that should matter is the fact that it's the executive office. Oh, so now we have to look at what Congress says for what the president could do. Okay, what else do we got here? Hold on, maybe he'll qualify that and I stopped him too early.
An omnibus, all-encompassing lifestyle, personal medical decree that wouldn't even affect you, that would affect you whether or not you even went to work. Because the court made that ruling, there was nothing really else to talk about. That is not in the statute. And as Justice Roberts, and this is when I first felt most hopeful, which was when I heard, excuse me, I got an itch. When I first heard Justice Roberts.
Remember, when he says not in the statute, what he's saying there is that the president's authority to operate the executive branch is constrained by the laws from Congress, which is true. That's correct. But that constraint only exists for Biden here, right? Which he's correctly illustrating the point. So he understands it. But when it comes to Trump, there are no such constraints. Those are for mere mortals.
Ask questions along these lines, saying, you know, isn't this something that OSHA has never done before? Isn't this something that if Congress wanted to give OSHA authority to do, that it would have done so explicitly? And the government tried very hard to make the argument that, well, it's in there. It's in there in the statute, but had to admit that it's never been used before. There's certainly been public health emergencies before, which is also part of the reason you kept hearing the justices on the left saying, but this is unprecedented. This is unprecedented. This is unprecedented. And I say unto you, my friends, I'm moving my microphone right up to my face to say this to you. Look right in the camera. Wake the kids. Call the neighbors. Unprecedented does not mean we dispense with the Constitution. As Jane said, that's precisely why we have the Constitution. Everything in history is unprecedented in some way. You know what was unprecedented? Pearl Harbor was unprecedented. And because of the infamy of the attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States government thought it was appropriate to round up everyone of Japanese ancestry and put them in concentration camps. Unprecedented would have been a complete...
Put them in concentration camps using the Alien Enemies Act. Hold on. But maybe he's going to defend that. Maybe. Hold on.
Completely appropriate response to any constitutional argument that would have been made. And as it happened, Korematsu, that argument did carry the day. That was wrong. And it was wrong here too. Let's see what else my friends have to say.
It's unbelievable.
I already got Jeff.
Actually,
yes.
Unbelievable.
Okay, so let's make one thing very clear. I'm going to give general, thematic, big picture observations on this topic in the hope that you will consider me to be a reliable source of news and information for you on legal matters, and maybe someday you'll consider hiring my...
Because, listen, we, at the end of the day, the only way the system works is if it's the actors in the respective branches of government act in accordance with the trust that's placed in them. And when they don't, there have to be checks and balances. So judges can be appealed from and their decisions can be reviewed, and the law can be changed, and even the Constitution can be changed, and the president is elected, and he can be, either enjoined. In other words, the answer is, I do hold of Marbury versus Madison. I don't understand. There are a number of people on the right who believe Madison, who say they believe. I think very few of them have really thought it through. And I think a very large number of those who have not thought it through are incapable of doing so. And who say Marbury versus Madison was a mistake. Then what is the judiciary for? Nothing. It just entirely. We've gone from the necessity of a case or controversy to basically an all advisory opinion judiciary with respect to government conduct, that exceeds or does not meet constitutional requirements. So I'm in the camp of being pro Marbury, Marbury, but ultimately, I suppose the Supreme Court will rule on this.
Yeah, but so the Supreme Court ruled with Biden. The Supreme Court said,
you
agree, right, that Biden was the dutifully and lawfully elected president of the United States, right?
He is bringing this up. Okay.
Yeah,
You're shaky
for practical
on it?
purposes.
For practical
Oh my God. He doesn't even believe in the outcome of the fucking election. This is where we're at right now? Seriously? This is my country?
I mean, no. He was acting as president of the United States. I mean, I don't think he was compos mentis for at least the last year of his time in office. I don't think he actually executed. I don't think he actually wielded executive power.
Epic memes.
And I do
dude.
think his election
Was fraudulent.
was highly irregular. It was fraudulent, but there have been many fraudulent elections before.
Oh my god.
And there will probably be fraudulent elections in the future.
So base.
So we have to live with that. At the end of the day,
What's this?
Yeah,
Can I just ask you? Because this is to me, it's insane that you people are still spreading these lies.
You people.
What's the
I like
what's,
that.
what's the evidence of
Yeah,
a
you
fraudulent
people.
election in 2020?
Hit 'em
What's
up
the
with the you
strongest piece,
people.
the single strongest piece of evidence?
81 million votes.
Oh my god.
Oh my god.
Just the
There
size
were
of
never-
the,
there were-
just the size of the victory.
This one was too big to
The
rig,
size,
guys.
the historic size of the victory on behalf of a person who never even won a legitimate primary
What?
until 2020, when everyone quit the same night. I mean,
Remember, these same people say that the media launched an unprecedented campaign against Donald Trump. You can explain Biden's unprecedented win using their own conspiracies. Maybe it was just the case that the whole media united against Donald Trump in some evil collective way. And that's what motivated so many U.S. citizens to go out and vote. Like that even works with your other conspiracies. But
it's such an obvious fraud. Let's not have that discussion tonight.
I mean, we don't have to, but can you understand how
Biden was the president.
Okay.
Biden was the president.
I agree with that, but I'll make one note on it, and we can leave it here. But I think it's absolutely shameful that the strongest piece of evidence you have to is just the fact that he won. If the fact that he won by those margins is enough to show that it's a fraudulent
One
election,
thing that you're going to have to do. That's one thing you're going to have to do
What's that?
in sharpening your not inconsiderable rhetorical skills is to swear off the use of adjectives and epithets. You don't need them. Make your point. Don't say don't use the lie and say it's wrong, say it's incorrect,
It's
say
wrong.
it's unsupportable.
okay, it's
incorrect, but it's
I'll follow your advice. It is wrong and unsupportable, and but I want to go further than that. I want to say it's borderline, psychotic.
I wasn't Philip. Listen, why wouldn't they let observers watch the counting of mail ballots in Philadelphia?
oh my
Why not?
god.
So
Pisco is correct here. So the lawyer guy would be correct, perhaps, if they were in court. Although even in court, lawyers use loaded language all the fucking time. They use them in complaints. They use them in people that are litigating actively. A litigator is somebody who argues in front of the judge and everything, right? Or a trial lawyer or whatever. Like, I hear lawyers use loaded language all the time. So I'm actually not sure where that comes from. Maybe I'm just not understanding it, but I see loaded language everywhere. But okay.
first of all, with respect to Philadelphia, there were official. Yeah, so there were official. So what oftentimes is conflated are the people that Trump wanted to be in there to see, but there were approved observers and unapproved observers. Fair?
Yes, I'm talking about approved observers under Pennsylvania law, pursuant to a decision of the intermediate appellate court, and when we presented the Philadelphia Board of Elections attorney with the order, she basically made it clear we're not gonna follow it, because they knew that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court would overturn it, but not because she was concerned about what was right, but because once the observers were let in, you realize what the order ultimately said under Pennsylvania law? Yes, the observers are let in, but they don't have to. But if you want to put them 50 feet away from where the counting is taking place, so that it is literally impossible to see what they're doing, that comports with Pennsylvania law.
And that's a law.
That's what the law.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Well, I thought earlier you were like, well, your issue then isn't with the your issue is not with what Trump is doing or whatever, or your issue is with the law. Then that should be your issue. Again, remember, they always live in both worlds, or all three worlds, or multiple worlds. It's string theory. Maybe there's 11 different dimensions of reality that Trump's given. When something is against them, then it's like, well, hold on, we need to see, like what can he do, what's possible. But then when it's against the other side, it's like, well, just look at the law, plain reading of the law, and that's all you got. Interpretation for their side, strict readings on your side. It's just so.
Makers have
Wait, if that's the law, that's the law. And in fact, I seem to recall there were a lot of changes to election law around COVID and pre-COVID, I should say.
A lot
For
done
example,
by
Act
Republican
77,
legislatures, yep.
Which was passed with bipartisan majorities in the Pennsylvania legislature.
So you think that when the legislature said observers should be allowed to observe, all it meant was that they had to be under the same room. So you could have put one of them in giant.
Also, don't trick yourself into thinking that if this law would have been changed, that it would have been any better. Because this exact same guy, if they would have had the law saying observers can be within 2 feet, if they would have had that law, this exact same guy would be on here saying why do observers need to be standing right over the shoulders of people counting? You don't think that is undue pressure? You don't think they could have reached forward and grabbed any of those ballots? You don't think they could have been communicating the observers with the counters to try to synchronize vote counting? They would give you the exact opposite argument, leading to the exact same conclusion. So don't ever pretend like they're giving you honest arguments ever. They never are. They never, ever, ever are.
Stadium on the go.
Because remember, they don't even believe in this observer theory, right? Because when you say, oh, so you think the observers weren't close enough? Well, can you explain how when they did the recounts, they all came back the exact fucking same? They're like, oh, that's a chain of custody issue. It's because the ballots were separated from the envelopes, and so it's a chain of... Okay, if it was a chain of custody issue, why the fuck are you talking about the observers then? Shouldn't you, if all the recounts ended up the same, shouldn't you just ditch the observer argument? Why are you even using that now, right? Like, or was it the same observers every time? Or was it the same cheating every time? Like, it's whatever, dude.
In the end zone of Giant Stadium, the other one in the other end zone, and if there's a roof on Giant Stadium, they would be valid observer. That was what the legislature intended.
So we don't go by what the legislature intended under originalism if we're following
yes, we do. That is a basic principle of
you do not go by what the legislature intended. You only ask that question when the text is not clear, was not plain and obvious. You always go with the plain and obvious text before you start looking into like the intentionality of the legislatures. This guy's about to give you, and Pisco rightfully threw this in his face, because this guy's absolutely done this conservative, well, we just read the document how it's written. We don't let our emotions influence how we think the law should be. We're not here to legislate from the bench. The idea that court justices are making up laws, you know, as they interpret the law. We just read it originally as it is. Now he's about to give you the most progressive, well, actually, if you read this in a certain way, and if you look at the intentions at the time for what they actually meant, these aren't questions that you're ever supposed to, unless there is not a clear and unambiguous reading of the text. When the text is clear and unambiguous, then the text stands. But he's about to contradict that.
That are intended under originalism. If we're following the
that is a basic principle we go by what do the word events? What intention do the words events when you refer to somebody?
The words themselves. The words events, not what do we think the justices meant at the time when they wrote them. What do the words themselves mean? Unless there's like a word that has fallen out of common parlance, or there's like an actual a word that's used that we don't use, then maybe you can ask questions like that. But that's only because the text is no longer clear and unambiguous.
The original public meaning. That's what I'm told. The original public meaning.
Correct.
There could be. You could have all the intent in the world.
You're confusing constitutional interpretation with statutory interpretation.
Why is that? So
oh my God.
Original public meaning is not relevant to statutory interpretation.
So for statutory interpretation,
statutory interpretation.
Why all the intent in the world?
Statutory interpretation is how the government. I'm sorry, when I say government, I mean specifically the executive branch interprets a law passed by the Congress. Statutory interpretation is how the government takes a law from Congress and then implements it into however they want to, enact that, whatever rules they create. Although it's kind of weird that he would even talk about statutory interpretation, because earlier he said the president can basically do whatever the fuck he wants as long as he thinks he's following the law, but whatever.
You're confusing constitutional interpretation with statutory interpretation. Why is that? So original public meaning is not relevant to statutory interpretation.
So for statutory interpretation, why should we look to the legislator's specific intent as opposed to? So for example, I'm going to give you an example here. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to give you an example. So there's this case, a Bostock, that went to the Supreme Court. It was interpreting various provisions of anti-discrimination frameworks, statutory frameworks, and what the Gorsuch opinion at the time. This is not a constitutional application. Gorsuch wrote an opinion which said, even though it was not the specific intent of the legislators at the time that these provisions were passed to protect same-sex situations or trans situations, the plain meaning of these texts, the sex-based discrimination would include situations for same-sex relations or situations, right? That is an example of the Supreme Court of the United States applying original public meaning analysis to statutory frameworks. And so
Gorsuch was wrong. I mean, that's one of the most disastrous.
Whoa! I didn't agree with Gorsuch, therefore he was wrong. So it's like none of this matters. It's all bullshit. This is all bullshit. It's all bullshit at the end of the day, right? What did he say before? Well, as long as it's constitutional. If it's not constitutional, can't do it. If it is constitutional, can't do it. Okay, well, do we agree with Marbury v. Madison? He literally defended Marbury earlier. Marbury v. Madison is basically what created the how we understand the Supreme Court today, which is the Supreme Court having the final final word on what a law means. That is in the exclusive purview of the Supreme Court, and only the Supreme Court can have the final review on what a law means. Even more so strengthened by the recent Loper ruling that overturned Chevron, that says that the federal government isn't free to interpret laws as they kind of think is possible. Only the Supreme Court can give you the final interpretation of law. This has been affirmed over and over again. And by the way, I guarantee you that he supported that Loper decision. It's not important what that is, but he absolutely did. I know he did. But for him to come out and for him to say all of these things, I do agree with Marbury. I do agree the Supreme Court is what gets to say. And then when the Supreme Court makes a decision he doesn't like, he's like, well, I think they were wrong here. Okay.
Analysis to statutory framework. And so
where it was wrong. I mean, that's one of the most disastrous opinions in American constitutional law history, and in terms of social policy and the social effect. And
in terms of social policy and social effect, who cares? That shouldn't matter. We're just reading the law. Why the fuck would social policy and social effect matter? That's for legislators to decide. That's for Congress to figure out. That has nothing to do with the Supreme Court. But listen to him. He's almost implying, or he's almost saying explicitly, really, the Supreme Court should have been thinking about social policy. They should have been thinking about the law when they were doing this interpretation, which is exactly what a super progressive type would say. This is a Sotomayor argument, not a fucking Scalia argument about interpretation of law. But
and the disregard for the democratic process, it was an absolute disaster.
What am I to make of it? I'm just trying to follow the law. I'm just trying to follow the Supreme Court. And so you say...
What case are they referring to? I don't know how major the case was, but there was a case where it had to do with protections. Fuck, what was it? Some title or whatever had to do with whether or not protections also extended to trans people. And I think that the Supreme Court said, yes, it did. And some people are very, very, very ass-pained about that.
That you shouldn't use that framework, whatever. Put aside, I haven't briefed the specific issue of the observers. I'm taking your representation that it was in fact lawful for them to put them away 50 feet. I assume that one of the purposes could be to make sure that no one is like that you don't need to see them individually counting the ballots, but just make sure they're not like trucking in a bunch of whatever, right? So I don't know the specifics of the Pennsylvania-Philadelphia ballot observer issue. I haven't done these debates in a while, but what I want to be clear is you represented that it was legal.
At every juncture where transparency would have been appropriate and harmless, seemingly harmless, it was opposed by the Democrats because it was a crooked election. But the worst thing that would have happened,
unbelievable, dude. This guy is unreal.
If the statutorily authorized observers had been allowed to actually observe, as opposed to standing in a room across a field, would be that they would have been closer than the people counting them wanted them to be. There was no accusation, no allegation that these people were armed, that they were dangerous, that they were harassing anyone. They wanted to see what was going on, and that was not permitted.
So you think that even though that this process, but what you said, you represented that it was lawfully, you might not agree with that interpretation, but what you're representing is that was a lawful procedure to force them to a certain distance away from the actual counters, even though it was completely legal. You said that was lawful. You said that was lawful.
I'm saying that was the ultimate conclusion of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Okay.
But I'm allowed to disagree with it. But at the end of the day, that was how the lawful process. Okay. But so if you're saying that...
What Pisco should ask here, because I think it is important to establish this, is even if you disagree with the court's ruling, you should still follow the ruling of the court, right? Because ultimately, that's what we rely on courts for, is to give us a ruling, right? So even if we disagree with the court's ruling, that ruling still stands.
If the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled that black people could not vote, and that was and no one interfered with that because that we'd be fine with that, right? Because
you'd appeal that. No, you wouldn't be fine with that because equal protections is obviously called in there, and that would never survive any sort of Supreme Court scrutiny, and that law would obviously and clearly be overturned.
We believe in positive jurisprudence, in whatever the law. No. Whatever the highest authority says.
So
we can disagree.
First of all,
we can disagree.
You can absolutely disagree, but where is the evidence that following lawful procedures and having observers at a given distance, X distance, I have no insight that makes you less likely, to observe the kinds of fraud that was intended by the legislature to observe. I'm not really sure. My intuition, I think it's your case to make that it would have been easier.
I'm there, and I'm telling you, it was.
But just to be clear, I'm just going to finish what I'm going to say. So finishing what I'm going to say, that's not evidence of fraud.
Okay, so I don't need evidence.
You don't need evidence, right?
If I see, I can deduce. If you take enough instances of a desire of questionable statistical phenomena, of counting stopping in the middle of the night for illegitimate reasons.
See, we're switching over to layman's arguments now. This is bullshit, and this doesn't work in a court environment where, well, if I can take a bunch of stuff that's like, oh, I don't know, maybe. No, there is a higher threshold than a bunch of what about questions. That's bullshit. That all of a sudden we can start overturning elections? No, that's bullshit.
Stop that. No, we're going to stop that right there. You're talking about Georgia?
Yeah.
What's because people were complaining they were counting through the night, and then also complaining that they weren't counting through the night. So what is the appropriate procedure?
Oh yeah, and Peter's kind of bringing it up here, right? Like you're gonna make no matter what argument you're gonna make the argument, right? Because remember, right, counting through the night, that was bad, but also Trump says we need every single ballot counted on election day. So what? Like it's all bullshit.
They were supposed to count through the night. They stopped counting and sent people home. Unprecedented.
It literally isn't. It's all bullshit. This is all bullshit. We watched those videos, by the way.
You never stop counting. You bring in different. You bring in crews. You bring in shifts of people. You don't stop counting. They made up a bullshit story about a plumbing problem. Okay, why did you have to make up a story?
That's
and the corruption of the election.
It's your bare assertion that it's a lie. Wait, it's your bare assertion that it's a lie, and they brought him back. They brought the counters back.
I brought him back after the period during which observers were able to maintain observation.
It's all on tape. I can't believe you guys are still with this, man. I mean, it's all on tape. They have the ballots on tape.
I can't believe you believe. I can't believe that you believe that the Biden election was legitimate.
Wait. Just to be clear, you recognize that the ballots. What you're referencing is the Rudy Giuliani story. Still to this day.
Remember what I said. What did I say? Wait, can anybody remember what I said that I'm about to say? Who's paying attention? Who's getting a cookie in class? What did I say? What did I say that we're seeing right now? What did I say? Yes, good job. Jabu, you get 20 gold stars. Furtive, yeah, you all get it. Yes. Once a Republican buys into a lie, they will never drop it. They will hold on. This guy probably talks to his great-grandchildren and says, oh, let me tell you, sonny boy, about how the 2020 election was stolen. They never drop. They can't. And the reason why they can't drop a lie is because their worldview is a cult. And in a cult worldview, the leader is infallible. The leader can't be wrong. If I were to ask you, for these religious, quizzes people, if I were to say, would you disobey an order from God? Never. You can't. Because as soon as God fucks up, he's no longer God. You can't be a God and make a mistake. So as long as Trump decrees something or commands something or decrees something is true, you have to believe it until forever. There's no turning back.
This whole notion that the ballots that were on film, where we can see them going underneath the tables in their containers, their approved ballot containers, that this entire situation where we can see all the counters and it's all on film, that there's evidence of fraud in that situation.
Like this guy would sooner disown his entire family before admit to Pisco that his God was incorrect about it. You can't. Call me. You can't. You just can't. It's impossible. You can never, ever admit this. You can never give this.
It's not all on film. That's nonsense. And by the way, Giuliani was utterly railroaded. Yeah. It is one of the all-time crimes against the rule of law in this country that a lawyer, compared to the things that Democrat lawyers have alleged and filed lawsuits claiming with respect to Republican.
Oh my God.
The idea that someone would be disbarred.
They defamed them. They defamed them. Giuliani defamed her. It's Ruby Moss and the other one.
Yeah, and she suffered $1 billion in damages.
Well,
right?
hang on a second.
Listen, look, layman, she suffered $1 billion in damage. What are secondary damages? What are punitive damages? What do you mean? You should know this, right? Or maybe he's not a lawyer. Maybe he's a fucking fake. Maybe he's a fucking law school flunky retard and he doesn't have a degree or anything and he should be fucking persecuted or prosecuted for illegally practicing law, right? Your awards aren't only statutory. Your awards aren't only compensatory damages. There's tons of other secondary and punitive damages you can award for. Why would you even bring up the amount here? Why would you even do that, right? It's all bullshit. This is all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all bullshit.
And the other one is
and she suffered $1 billion in damages.
Well,
right?
Hang on a second. He is not complying with discovery. He is, completely flouting the courts in this entire process. And absolutely, they rang their names through the mud. They said that these two individuals who did nothing but their civic duty.
Yep.
But as you stand here, you have no evidence, do you, that these individuals did anything wrong? Is that right?
And imagine the public interest there. You don't have to imagine. You just have to not be a fucking moron. Imagine the public interest there in having people that can do work with elections, that can do public service, and don't have to be petrified of being attacked by the opposition, by a political opponent, of being disparaged, of having your name dragged through the mud, of being accused of being a druggie and a criminal and an electioneer rigger. Like, imagine all of this, right? Of course there's a massive public. It shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that Giuliani was absolutely dragged on this, and as he should have been.
I'm not making the claim, so I don't have to present evidence.
No, I'm saying you're not. Wait, I just want to be clear. Are you or are you not alleging, or is it your belief that they did anything wrong?
Yeah, I believe they did something wrong. They'll sue me too.
You believe they did something wrong? What's the basis of that belief?
The basis of the belief is what God said, or what God's representative, Rudy Giuliani, said, even though Rudy Giuliani couldn't prove any of these claims whatsoever, anywhere. And we watched the videos. They lied about everything. They lied about not knowing where the containers came from. They lied about, they lied about literally about every single thing. Every single thing relating to this, they lied about. You saw it all. It's all.
Because they're black?
All right, that is such a bad. I didn't even know they were black. That is such a bad faith.
What's the basis?
Wait,
What's the basis to believe they did something wrong? What's the basis to believe they did something wrong? Name it.
The entire manner in which that
That's not
counting
anything.
process went was corrupt.
Oh my God.
These two individuals. Wait, no. These two individuals. The two individuals that were defamed by Rudy Giuliani.
What are their names? What are their names? What are their names?
Ruby Freeman.
Moss and Freeman. I forget.
Oh no, it is. It's Ruby Moss and it's Freeman and Moss. I don't remember the first name of the other lady, but
Her first name.
why is he like quizzing him on this though? Wait, why is he like name the names? Why is he? Oh, I know why. He was trying to quiz him because he was gonna say, I know where this guy. God, he's such a snake fuck. He was gonna say, what are the names? What are the names? And if Pisco didn't know, he's gonna see, you didn't even know their names. So the defamation must not have even been that bad. You didn't even remember them. So there's no way Giuliani could have defamed them from 4 or 5 years ago. Oh my God.
That's corrupt.
That's
These two individuals. Wait, no. These two individuals. The two indivials that were defamed by Rudy Giuliani.
What are their names? What are their names? What are their names?
Ruby Moss and Freeman. I forget her first name.
So, these are people who are. How were they affected by this?
And now he's got to change his argument up because he was hoping Pisco didn't remember the names. Even if Pisco didn't know the names, it's not relevant. It doesn't matter. It's 5 years ago. And these could have been more local to the state of Georgia. Pisco's from New York, right? It's not even relevant. Like,
hang on a second.
Did they lose their job? Did they lose their income?
Hang on a second. We're dealing with your claim. You said you believe they did something wrong. What, in fact, do you believe they did wrong? What's the evidence that they specifically did something wrong?
Who was their employer?
So you're not answering the question, right?
he has no idea.
No. In order to answer the question, I want information. Who was their employer?
Who is their employer? What?
Was it the Board of Elections in Georgia?
Whoever their employer is has some tendency to bear on whether or not they did something wrong?
Yes, because if that's a corrupt organization that operates in a...
Oh my God. What is every single case a RICO case now? What does he mean? If that's a corrupt organization, they're guilty by... Corrupt how? Guilty by association? How? What do we even... Bro, get me out of here. It's actually unbelievable. Lawyers are in shambles in the United States of America. I can't even believe this is unreal, dude. Like, he should be disbarred for this conversation, for like having a shame brought on the entire fucking profession. It's actually disgusting. Like, this is insane to me.
Corrupt manner, then they did something wrong.
So they can by the fact that they're employees, they can inherit the negligent, reckless, or evil acts of their employer.
Also, yeah. I don't know where Pisco's gonna go because there's a million different ways that you could do this in a way that would apply to Trump. But okay. But now I think he might have just realized it's like, wait a second. He's going to be like, well, it depends on specifically what the actions were and whether or not it was a Democrat or Republican. It's going to depend specifically on what the illegal actions of the employers of these people were.
If they participated in them, yes.
Okay. So I think that these people were employed by whatever Georgia sort of municipality is there. I don't know. They might also have private employers. I'm not sure.
The election authorities in Georgia have been shown to be, they destroyed so many records after that election in violation of the law. No accountability, not from Republicans, not from Democrats. No accountability whatsoever. Why would you destroy records that you are statutory?
Like, now look at what we moved on from. And also, oh God, Pisco should attack this. They destroyed the records. Well, hold on. If they destroyed the records, then you're admitting there's no evidence. So how do you even know something wrong happened? What are you even basing this belief off of?
Giuliani accused them of fraud, of voter fraud. That's what Giuliani accused them of.
Voter fraud.
What's that? Voter fraud. Prove that they committed voter fraud. Prove it.
I don't have to prove to you. I'm just making the statement. You don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe. I'm not here as a plaintiff.
They were there as plaintiffs and they lost. They got eviscerated in all of their cases except for one. 62 out of 63 of the cases. And the small one they won in Pennsylvania wasn't even consequential.
Fraud claim. I mean,
Man to man. These are innocent women, and they were man to man. These people were accused falsely by Trump. Yeah.
Do you realize that when you didn't like what I had to say, your assumption was to say that I was accusing them because they were black? I didn't even know they were black.
The fact that Pisco, I guess shouldn't have said that, but like it doesn't matter. Like he's just like desperately trying to cling on to that one thing. He's like desperately trying to go, oh, you're trying to get me right now. Like desperately hoping that that one thing can save him here.
Okay.
Where did that come from?
Because
where did that come from?
Yeah, so
is that a rhetorical device that you
I
use
understand.
when you-
I understand that you're distracting now from the point, which is there is no evidence. But I said because they're black. I'm asking because there is no substantive evidence that they did anything wrong. There is no substantive evidence they did any fraud, and that was it was investigated.
That wasn't the discussion I agreed to have with you tonight.
I understand.
You're the one that got us here because you said that you didn't believe in the outcome of the election. You took us here. Jesus.
I understand.
I didn't say.
Remember, this whole tangent started because I believe Pisco, I think he asked him, do you agree that, because Pisco was going to test this guy on hypocrisy on how he viewed Joe Biden's presidential term and the rulings that Joe Biden did, but they couldn't quite get there because they couldn't even agree that Joe Biden was the president because this guy was saying election fraud, and then that's how they got off into this neck of the woods.
Let's talk. I'm going to talk to you about why Rudy
We can move
Giuliani
on. Hey, listen, Ron. We can move. I'm happy to move on. But go ahead.
Okay, let's move on.
All right. Listen, I just lose my shit when we're continuing to have these repetitive conversations. Listen,
I was on the phone with Rudy Giuliani election night discussing these claims. I was aware of the evidence on which he was acting. I was part of the team, and I was invited to join the team in Washington that ultimately rolled down the hill. And I'm grateful to God that I said I couldn't do it because that Shabbos, my son was making a celebration in honor of his.
Remember what I said. Wait. Can anybody think of what I'm going to say now? Hold on. Can anybody think of what is in my brain right now? How much is chat in my mind? What am I going to say? What am I going to say? Who knows what I'm going to say? Somebody said, why did you lose the fucking case? The slow blade penetrates the shield. Close. Okay. Infuriatingly opaque got the closest. That every accusation is confession. In his mind, right? If you're trying to wonder where the justification from some of these types comes from for the current Trump administration, in his mind, the Trump admin had a fully legitimate and fully fleshed out case for election fraud, even though they didn't, even though there's no evidence. There's none that he can even speak of. This guy literally just said that he was on the phone and knew of the evidence firsthand, and he can't bring out any of it. He's trying to cite the fact that he had a conversation with Giuliani, almost like he's a subject matter expert, which should make him even more informed than Pisco, but he can't name a single fucking thing. He can't name a single fucking thing about supposedly all of this evidence that he was shown. He can't name a single thing about it, okay? But despite that, he thinks that Giuliani was unfairly prosecuted for just trying a court case. And that's why when these people talk about what Trump is doing, all of it is justified. Of course, all of it's justified because the Democrats have already done worse. They already went after Giuliani for no reason. They already went after all these innocent people who hadn't done anything wrong, right? In their mind, the Dems have already done worse.
My son was making a celebration in honor of the birth of his daughter, and I couldn't join them. I don't know what ultimately happened after our conversation ended, but I will tell you that those of us who were, I was in Pennsylvania that night on the phone with him and the team, and everything that we were seeing, and I'm talking about stuff about Venezuela or West Germany.
Also, keep in mind what the fuck this guy's saying. Did he say he was on the phone on election night? So they had nothing. Pisco, I feel like this is just the killer. Just like, okay, you were told all this on election night. So you're telling me that you had your mind made up that there was election fraud before an investigation had even begun? Do you understand how fucking insane that sounds? How fucking crazy you are?
Germany, any of the crazy stuff that, came down the pike later, or Belarus, whatever it was. There was so much monkey business there that, yes, it's a bona fide claim, and it certainly wasn't intentional.
You guys tried to steal the election. You realize that? You realize you tried to steal the 2020 election?
Based.
No, I don't see it that way at all. I think that Biden did steal the election, and he tried. And I think it's the best thing that ever happened for this country and for Donald Trump that 2020 went the way it did, because the Donald Trump of 2024, 2025 is an immensely more effective weapon.
Oh my God.
For MAGA and for the Trump agenda than he would have been in 2020.
That's ultimately what you care about.
It's just, that's all he cares about. It is true. All you give a fuck about is like winning versus losing, right? That's what I'm saying. It's like these guys are at war. These guys don't view this as some kind of like political back and forth. These guys they view it as an armed conflict between two countries where you have to win at all costs. You know, rules and laws be damned. They'll sort that shit out after, once the dust settles.
Ask you what you think of Mike Pence in this whole situation. I mean, Mike Pence, this is
I think Mike Pence, I don't know. I hear a lot of shit about what Mike Pence did. I never believed that Mike Pence had the power. And I said this on Twitter, as it was called then, many, many times. People are ascribing to Mike Pence some sort of discretion. This is a ministerial role that
I like how he avoids that. It's never Trump. It wasn't just people in the news ascribing this to Mike Pence. It was Donald Trump, John Eastman, and Sidney Powell. You're lying. It wasn't people in the media. It was people in the media, and they were getting it from Trump's campaign. They were getting it from Trump. We know that for a fact. That's not random people in the media. That's your president, Chief.
that he has in certifying the election. It was not his place.
Wow, Powell, thanks for the 500 DKK.
To do anything other than what he did.
Trump tried to pressure him to steal the election using that power.
Yep.
No, Trump tried to pressure him to utilize his
thing to give them more time to search for election fraud.
His power in a way that Trump,
in a way that you say is illegal.
Advice he was getting,
in a way that you say is illegal.
I don't think it would have been illegal, but I think it would have been very problematic. I think it would have raised.
He didn't. He says he just said Pence didn't have the power to do that, but if he would have done that, it wouldn't have been illegal. What? There's no standard. There's no standard. They can do anything. Remember, they will defend Gallows. They will. They will. People like this will defend anything. They will defend anything the administration does. Anything that they do.
You think it might have been legal for Mike Pence to declare Trump the victor?
Oh no, we couldn't. I don't see how we could have possibly done that. I don't. And I
said, what are you talking about? That's what he was asked to do.
I'm glad to hear that, but I mean, notwithstanding that, Trump tried to steal the election. He tried to have Pence do that. He tried to have Pence declare them the victor.
Yep.
That's
my question is that he tried to get Pence to.
Here it comes. He was just asking for 10 more days to do election fraud investigation. It's coming. I know it's coming. I'm edging myself, waiting for him to say it. Please just say it. He was just trying to get Pence to give him 10 more days to find election fraud. Please say it.
To slow down the process of certifying the election so that the irregularities could actually be addressed.
Oh, I just cummed in my pants. Oh, I just cummed all over. Yes, thank you. Thank you for getting back to the bullshit.
I do think that things got very out of hand in the White House in December and January.
Listen to the language they use. The removal of agency, right? Things got out of hand. No, they didn't. Things went intentionally exactly the way that Donald Trump wanted them to. Things didn't just randomly get out of hand. Oh, I don't know what was going on there.
Of 2019, 2020, 2021. I'm not. I wasn't there. Yeah. And there are a lot of there's a lot of contradictory information. I only have like another 15 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Hey, listen,
let's try to get back on
I appreciate you talking. The only reason I have to say all that stuff is because I have to express, and I don't know what happened that you are with these people, but these people are despicable. I mean, Rudy Giuliani is a traitor to the country. They try to steal his election, and I have to express that to you because I couldn't. I'm genuinely very.
And Pisco's a real ass lawyer. I don't know how much. I'm not going to dox him. But he went to a big ass fucking. Everybody's heard of the law school. He goes. He works for a big ass company. Pisco's a real ass lawyer. He shouldn't just attack these people as shitty Americans, which they are. They're also a shame on the profession. Okay, which has a deep and important history in the United States of representing, in some cases, people against the state. In some cases, the state against other people. In some cases, parts of the state against other parts of the state, states against the federal government, right? This is an important profession, and this guy is bringing shame on it. And he should point that out more when you're talking to his lawyers. As a lawyer, right? These guys are disgracing their profession. It's disgusting.
Person.
Where did this guy graduate from? I bet this guy is some fucking Yale, some huge, it's insane. It's disgraceful. It is disgraceful.
I'm completely okay with you expressing that to me.
Okay, cool.
It doesn't do me any harm. It's the kind of thing that I expect from people on the left. They use very extreme language, stealing election, despicable,
Hang on a
things
second.
like that.
Trump-
Wait, that was your language. Wait, they use extreme language like stealing the election. That was what you just said, Chief. Hello? What?
uses that language. Trump uses. You understand? Trump uses that.
Also,
that
Trump is known for using extreme language. That's literally like his most. That's his most like noticed. It's like one of his most noticed traits. It's prominent traits. Like, what are we talking about? Well, it's different when Trump does. It's because he's not a politician.
Action, despicable,
Hang on a
things
second.
like that.
Trump uses that language. Trump
uses.
uses. You understand? Trump uses that today. Trump said that the election was stolen in 2020. So you can't really say, oh, the left uses this bombastic language of stealing the election.
The election was stolen in 2020.
Okay,
but I don't think that Trump tried to steal the election. I think that Trump tried to preserve the election that he believed.
At a bare minimum, that's all. But at a bare minimum, you can say that this whole the point you just made about bombastic language from the left, that's bullshit, right? Because I just shown you that Trump uses that exact same language, and it's not a distinguishing
stolen election. That's the language you're talking about.
What's that?
Stolen election is what
you just said. You just said.
Like, listen to what he's saying, right? Just to be clear, so we're all on the same page. You are alleging the greatest political fraud in the history of the entire fucking planet. The entire history of planet Earth would be the stealing of the 2020 United States election. Strongest country on the planet, pivotal moment in history, okay? And the most important office that somebody can be elected to. Probably one of the most watched elections in all of human history in terms of number of people, number of systems, in terms of eyes around the entire world, right? You're saying that that election was stolen in a plot that would have involved the coordination of the deep state, of all the judiciary, of different lawyers working against, Giuliani, Sidney Powell, of all the different election officials, of the state legislatures that you said were like all of this, and you're just like, well, that's not loaded. I'm just simply saying that the election was stolen. LOL. It's like going to a physicist and saying like, oh, I think I figured out how to travel faster than light. LOL. It's like going to a financial guy and saying like, oh, I think I can always beat the market. LOL. It's like going to I don't know. It's like one of the dumbest fucking things in the fucking universe to just say this and pretend it's not a massive claim. Like, whatever.
The left has this exaggerated language of stolen election, and I'm pointing to you and saying, at the very minimum, your semantic analysis cuts both ways because Trump uses the same exact language. That has to follow.
Trump does use very colorful language. I'll grant you that. But
colorful. I hate him. I hate this guy.
Yeah, no, I think that most
followers
people.
don't.
His followers. That's 80 million people, right? We have to be. We have to.
Well,
be careful about that.
We have to be careful. So the consensus here matters now. We're going to say that if there are enough of them, they must be right. That's how we're doing the rulings now.
80 million seems inherently not trustworthy. 80 million seems like it couldn't happen.
That's a number that can never be true.
Yeah, I mean,
he laughs that off, but Pisco should press him more. Like, why is it believable that 80 million people voted for Trump, but 81 million or whatever, didn't vote for Biden? It's because he doesn't like Biden. That's the answer. But okay.
I mean, who can deny? I mean, that's a very strong evidence fraud. All right, I know that you have short time. I do still appreciate, by the way, the conversation. I think we ought to have conversations even with people we disagree like strongly on. Taking it back to the present, what would you say in terms of some of Trump's pushing the boundaries of the executive branch? I'm very troubled by that. Put me at ease with that. Or are you also troubled by some of it? What are you troubled about? What do you think I'm overreacting to? Talk me through that.
What is he laughing? What do you say?
Well, I think there is definitely I think you're right. I think there is a strategy to reassert the executive, and in particular
it's so like this guy's mind is working at 20 billion. Like he's about to have steam coming out of his head trying to excuse the insane bullshit from this administration to try to make it okay. It's actually crazy.
Pull power back from not Congress and not the judiciary, but from unelected components, unaccountable components of government.
Unaccountable?
Including NGOs.
The NGOs
and permanent bureaucracies.
Okay.
It has reached the point where so much money is going into these entities that no one has the slightest idea what they're doing with it. And it turns out that quite a bit of what they're doing with it is either direct or indirect political activism that is first of all just inappropriate for an inappropriate use of taxpayer money. And to the extent that we, as a democracy, say we don't want the president controlling that much of the government, that means we don't want there to be that much government, and that's a good thing.
What?
Does it bother you that Doge has not reduced spending at all?
Well, let's wait and see.
I don't really know. I think it's Congress that has to reduce spending, not Doge. Doge identifies issues that should have been identified probably by the government accounting office.
That's what I
but
thought.
They haven't identified
That's what I
anything.
thought. But you seem to say that it's okay for the president
To do everything
stop funding
unilaterally.
unilaterally to any agency he deems to be a waste of time or money.
You did say that.
I thought that it was the president.
The general accounting office is supposed to be an auditing. I understood it to be an auditing function.
Oh,
not
well
a
then why do we
policy
have Doge?
So I don't know why you're.
Well, no, what I'm saying
comparing those
is,
two things.
I would tend to agree that Congress controls the purse strings, and so if anyone's going to make a cutback on spending, it's going to be, or the scope of government, it should be Congress. Maybe the executive can, trim at the edges and do a couple things here and there, pursuant to their inherent authorities or to congressional enactments. But it doesn't seem that Doge or this downsizing of government has resulted in.
I'm not talking about. I'm talking about Doge. Your question was, doesn't Trump have a strategy of asserting a level of power, executive power? Right.
Yep.
I think the answer is yes.
Pisco should get him to I know he'll say yes. Pisco should ask him, do you think it's kind of weird that Trump is saying that he could run for a third term? And the guy's going to say, well, I mean, like, there are arguments for him being able to do that. That's not like an impossible to believe argument. Like, he could. That's what this guy would say. 1,000,000,000,000%.
And I think that.
Well, how do you feel about it is my question. Like, walk me through. Why am I being histrionic?
I didn't say you were being histrionic.
No, I think it's fun. Assume that because people will say,
well,
Pisco, you're overreacting. You're overreacting. It's not a big deal.
Down. No. I don't think you're overreacting. I think that given your values and your political desiderata, it is a great panic. There's every reason in the world to panic, because if Trump succeeds in starving these U.S. aid, for example, and prohibiting it from funding overseas culture war battles that are obnoxious in the countries where they're being funded and are not democratically enacted even by Congress, then I think that's a great thing. But if you're a leftist and you believe that an elite group of administrators should be allowed to take blocks of grant money and spend them to put rainbow flags all over the world and do this sort of, again, culture war type of stuff, then we disagree. And it's a threat that Trump is trying to prevent that from happening.
I mean, I'm not super well read on the USAID specifics of the grant money, so I have no specific, I take it to be probably a good use of soft power for America to have, their claws in different areas and able to, leverage that against other countries. I think it's useful from a strategic standpoint, but I have no specific.
Think of how internally inconsistent this is, right? Like, I don't think it's good for them to be advocating in other countries. I thought you said transing kids is like a thing that the government can do if they put propaganda. It's like, yes. Well, shouldn't we then want them to do that in other countries? Aren't they like bringing down our opponents? Like, don't we want them transing kids in other countries to make the United States even stronger by turning all the other countries trans? Like, wouldn't that be a good thing?
Specialized knowledge on the funding that goes through. I know that a lot of it probably goes to hungry kids and people who are dying and shit. So I probably want to fund at least some of that. But regardless, my bigger problem is with the structural concern. That is, Congress funded this shit, and so I do have a problem with Trump trying to stymie the clear expressed will of Congress.
True.
And that seems to be what his aim is to undermine
That's what this guy
Article 1
said, right?
appropriation power, and you seem to be fine with it.
He is.
Well, do you believe that he's acting unconstitutionally?
I sure do.
Yep.
So then I think if the Constitution backs you up ultimately, which I think we will, which
he's not about to say this. He's not about to say if the Constitution backs you up, then the Supreme Court will agree, because he just said earlier that he disagreed with the Supreme Court decision around the trans stuff. Is he really about to, now he's going to appeal to the same Supreme Court that he says you can disagree with? Like, what
is yet to be determined? Then it will work the way you want it to work.
Through the Supreme Court.
I do think there is a strong argument that the Constitution doesn't back you up, and that only the president can take care. Only the president, that the entire reason that the president is elected by the entire nation is to effectuate policies. And if you say that the only policies he can effectuate are ones that are mandated by Congress, as approved by the judiciary, then why do you have
Here's the example. So let's say, for example,
what? Hold on.
Congress is to effectuate policies. And if you say that the only policies he can effectuate are ones that are mandated by Congress,
what other policies can he do besides the ones mandated by Congress and the Constitution? Yes, that's where the president gets his powers from. What do you mean?
As approved by the judiciary, then why do you have
Here's the example. So let's say, for example, Congress appropriates, I don't know, let's call it $60 billion worth of funds to, let's say, the state of Israel. Can the president decide, I'm not going to send that money?
I think he can. I think he can. I think the presidents do that because it's within the national security power of the president.
What
a bad example. Let's talk about something domestic.
All right, let's talk about
that's
something,
too easy.
Let's talk about something domestic. I disagree with that, but like, let's talk about something maybe easier for me, I guess, which would be, let's say that the Congress says we want to spend, let's call it $200 billion on infrastructure for let's say something like green energy. Can the president say no? We're not going to do that.
Yeah. So didn't Nixon lose on that? Didn't Nixon lose in the sequestration cases in the 1970s?
There was a.
I don't actually.
There's a Chadha case, and there's.
I don't claim.
Good.
You know, I mean, I'm not particularly knowledgeable about what the
But is it even conceivable, right, that the president has the inherent executive authority to just stop any funding that Congress passes? Is there any funding that Congress could pass that the president can halt?
That doesn't sound right, right? It doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right.
Doesn't sound right. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it sounds
Probably
right.
Doesn't.
I think it's but
Probably
that
pretty
is essentially
obviously
what
it's not.
Russell Vought is claiming and Trump is claiming.
I suppose the problem, though, is Congress often, or probably usually, allocates money for very broad purposes. So the effectuation of the broad purposes are left to the executive. And Congress doesn't want to get into the weeds of being more specific when it allocates money, because that would require hard political choices that Congress doesn't want to make. So they leave it.
Notice now he's saying that the president is constrained by Congress. But before it seemed like the president is free to do what he wants. I don't know. We just go wherever we want, I guess, here.
To the president and to the permanent bureaucracies. And what the executive and what Trump, I think, is appropriately doing here is saying, Congress, if you want to say that I have to spend $30 million on mosquito nets, I'll buy mosquito nets. But if you say $30 million to alleviate suffering, then I'm going to decide what alleviate suffering is.
Listen, I
think that is what's going on.
If it's written, I think that there could definitely be different cases in different situations. And I certainly think, for example, it is not responsible for Congress constantly to be writing in such broad terms and to be passing these CRs. On that, I think I totally agree. I just think that the Republicans have done nothing to advance the specificity of what's happening here. I think, the House Republicans in particular are just useless. They can't govern.
True.
But to be 100% clear, there will be some cases where it'll be generic, like you said, and maybe I can acknowledge that the president can allocate it some way versus the other. And there even is some, I would even recognize that under the Impoundment Control Act, that there are situations in which the president, temporarily halt, can do certain actions. But we're talking about something completely different. We're talking about the president's authority, his claimed authority, to halt all federal financial assistance totally, right? And I first of all don't know what would stop the president of the United States under that theory from just pausing all Social Security checks, because he says, we need to audit it, right? We need to audit what's going on with Social Security.
Social Security.
He's going to attack it because he doesn't like Social Security. So he's going to have a reason why you can actually attack Social Security too if you really want to.
The problem with that example, right, is that we operate under this preposterous legal fiction of a trust fund. So it is different. It is different. But let's say
always
think of a million other benefit programs, right? Entitlements. If you have entitlements, right, that are regular.
There's always a reason why they can go after the things they don't like. There's always a reason.
Funded entitlements. Could the president say we're not going to pay veterans benefits anymore?
Yeah, that's a great example.
I don't see how we could. I don't see how we could.
But basically, that's the kind of conduct that we're seeing. Now, he's not touching a lot of the stuff. He is actually touching very important stuff. And for example, they're with Social Security and some of the regulations there. But let's just put that aside. Some of the stuff they're not touching because they know the political ramifications. But in essence, they're saying there's a lot of fraud here, so we have to put a pause until we figure out what the is going on, and we got to actually pause everything before we look into the fraud. And if they wanted to, I think that they would claim the authority to pause anything on the basis of we need to audit it for fraud. That's what they're doing with a lot of these agencies, and I mean, it just seems to be the MO.
Yep.
If the president has the constitutional power to do that, then I think it's a great thing that he does it. And if he does not, then I believe that he will be prohibited from doing it. And if the courts properly, valid if a valid order from a legitimate U.S. court with proper jurisdiction and on behalf of a plaintiff with the appropriate standing.
You're so worried about. Oh my God, dude! It's unreal.
Can't do it.
It's actually unreal.
And that's how it's going to be. Let me just tell you something, Pisco. When in 2020, I was involved in a lot of litigation involving COVID lockdowns.
Oh boy!
Gross constitutional violations that were permitted, that were promulgated by, depending on the state,
Republicans and Democrats.
Republicans and Democrats, governors, legislatures, and rubber stamped by judiciaries. And I would make the same kind of argument along the lines of, if you're going to say that the police power is so compelling under the Constitution, police power which doesn't even appear in the Constitution.
Well, there is no. Hang on, wait. That's. I just want to pause right there because I think it's an interesting question. It's one for people. So when he's referencing the police power, it's not the power of the police. It's a term meant to the general
the ability of the state to govern.
Right, but
govern.
But what I want to say here is you wouldn't expect that the Constitution reference a general police power because the federal government does not have a general police power, and the states are the ones that have the general police power, and they're assumed as part of the Constitution. They don't owe their existence to it.
It's axiomatic to having a government that it has to be able to do things. Having said that, we were left without relief in many cases because that's the way the Constitution was set up. If the courts agree that the executive has this power, then your only recourse is going to be to vote for executives in the future who are more to your liking, to vote for legislators who will draft more specific legislation, or to live with it.
Yeah.
And that's it. The Constitution. I'm not one of these things that always bugs me, Pisco, is
yeah.
And I think it's more common on the right than on the left. This idea of the Constitution is a sort of I think it's inspired, and I think that in many respects it demonstrates a brilliance that is quite impressive. But it's not a religious principle. It's not divine. And this idea that we should worship the Constitution. I mean, we have to agree that we're going to live in a constitutional, that it's a constitutional republic, and we're going to follow the Constitution. But we should not be afraid to acknowledge when it fails, and when change would be well advised.
On that word,
I know
I want to respect your time, and so I want to give you a close out here. I just have one more question for you.
So is he saying there are times we should interpret it differently or amend it? Like, what does that even? I don't even know what that set of stamps meant, but okay.
And but I do appreciate the time. And listen, it got acrimonious there, but I take nothing personal. I'm happy to continue this chain of dialogue.
Yeah, I don't take any of this. I don't take any of this personal, including the fact that you accuse me of being
I asked the question. I asked the question. You did have a funny joke during one of the podcasts about I guess he's not black. And I think it was a reference, though, to what Joe Biden said. It was in some context, I think. It might not have been you. It might have been Sean, criminal Sean. I don't know, actually. I'm not remembering it. But I do appreciate your time. Yeah. But
it's fun. I hope that your listeners felt that we had an honest discussion, and that's all I can really ask.
No, sure. And so I just have one last question, and then I'll one last question, and then I'll let you go. Which is, if the Supreme Court issues a direct order to President Trump, and if the President Trump does not follow it, will you condemn him for that?
Only if I agree with what the court says. Only if it's a lawful order. He's going to say something along those lines. Only if the order was legitimate, meaning only if he agrees with what the court said. Or he's going to give the endless qualifiers. As long as they had the appropriate jurisdiction and it was appropriately narrowly tailored and it was lawful and it did, that's it. He's not going to give a yes to this. No shot.
I will condemn the decision. I think it would be a great...
Wait. Condemn the decision. Wait. Maybe he meant the decision of the administration, not the court's decision. I'm sorry. Hold on.
To President Trump, and if the President Trump does not follow it,
hold on. Let me be fair.
Will you condemn him for that?
I will condemn the decision. I think it would be a grave mistake, and I think that everyone I know in the administration believes the same thing.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ron, for taking the time. Really appreciate the discussion. Let's keep the communication open. I love talking to people I disagree with,
sure.
and yeah, thank you. I know it was late, and I appreciate it.
And it's so rare. It's so rare, and I give you all the credit in the world, Pisco, for having someone on who's not brain damaged, and I don't think I am brain damaged, who can mix it up with you, because it's really hard for me to find debating partners, because most people on the left don't want to have a discussion. So I give you all the credit in the world.
Hey, appreciate that, Ron. Yeah, have a good one. Bye bye. What is there to say, folks? I didn't know that he interfaced with Giuliani. That was news to me. Pretty cooked. I mean, I appreciate his time and stuff, and happy to talk with him again. I like debating people who disagree with me. But, like, what is there to say? Right? We start off that conversation. He's like, I'm not going to call out illegal actions and bad actions. I'm not. I wouldn't tweet out,
president
doesn't don't do this
because we're in a war.
It's bad for my political side. Isn't that a definition of a hack? Like, imagine that I admitted that, right? That I will not call on the Democrats to do something that I believe to be wrong because it will hurt me politically. It's wild. The 2020 stuff is just completely cooked. He alleged that these people who he doesn't even know, right? I guess who they are. He believes they committed election fraud. They still think the 2020 election was stolen. These are, by the way, these are the more intellectual members of what I would consider to be the cult. I do, and if Ron's listening, I do consider you to be a member of a cult.
He is.
I'm sure you consider me to be a member of a cult.
He does.
I think one of us is much closer.
And I actually don't know Pisco's immigration background. I'm assuming Pisco was born in the United States. But if it ever came to the point to where Pisco was being deported because of whatever ethnic background or whatever he's saying right now, and the administration decides that, well, your parents wouldn't have been allowed into this country if they would have known, if immigration would have known that their children would have been saying these anti-American talking points, that guy would defend it. He would defend Pisco being deported, and he would do it.
To be empirically correct on that. But this guy, I assume he reads the news. He's not in an epistemic bubble necessarily. I'm assuming he's exposed to the counter arguments. And so if someone like this, right, continues to believe the election is stolen, we're in trouble.
Pretty wild. Do you have any channel recommendations for center-left people who focus more on culture rather than policy? Whenever I look, they always end up being secret tankies. I don't know. I don't even know. I feel like culture center-left people just aren't politically involved at all.